Content warnings for this episode include dysphoria, suicide, sexual abuse, involuntary hospitalization and medication, and religious trauma.
Welcome to GenderMeowster Podcast Network. Genderful is a talk show featuring non-binary and trans folks discussing various topics and special interests. We kindly remind our listeners that no person is a monolith of identities. All opinions are the speaker's own. This show airs live on Twitch at twitch.tv/GenderMeowster, and VODs with show notes can also be found on YouTube.
So hi everyone, I'm GenderMeowster. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm delighted to welcome back to Genderful my dear friend, Brooke West, who uses they, she pronouns. Hey Brooke.
Thanks for having me back.
We had so much fun last time. We got through less than half of what I planned for us to talk about, and so I was like, well, obviously, Brooke has to come back.
And we also had good comments from the listeners, right?
We totally did. Yeah.
There was some feedback that it was heard and received with interest.
Yeah, totally. It's so good. So before we dive into questions that I have, you said that you wanted to offer some sort of mini yoga practice for us today.
I would love to do like a centering, an embodied centering practice, just to center myself and also kind of attune to the vibe and allow myself to clear my mind a little bit before I go into this conversation, transitioning from the last one.
Yeah.
So if you feel to, you might bring your awareness to your seat, where your body connects with whatever it is that's supporting it. And beneath that, you might bring your awareness to the earth beyond your seat. And if it's appropriate for you, you might gently bring your awareness to your feet and to your calves and to your thighs, onto the sits bones, to the low back and the low belly below the navel. And from here outward to the hands, the lower arms, and the upper arms. You might draw your awareness to the heart center. That could be the heart itself, or including the lungs as you breathe, the rib cage, the middle back, the upper back, the back of the neck, inviting any inspiration into the back of the neck, the point between the eyebrows, receptive to any inspiration. If you feel to, you might bring your awareness to the rhythm of the breath, and in particular to the exhalation, which is the relaxation phase of the breath. And taking just another couple of minutes, if you feel to, you might draw your awareness outward to the environment that you're in, the room or the space. You might notice sounds, temperature, eyes closed or open. You might observe any sensations of light, perceptions of color or shape. Observing any taste in the mouth, any scent to the air. Observing any physical sensations or mental thoughts or emotional feelings that might be giving you any messages. And if there's a directive to those messages, you might allow yourself to honor that directive if it feels safe for you, for anyone else, and comfortable, nourishing. Observing the exhalation, the point between the eyebrows. If you'd like to deepen the breath, you might lengthen the spine, lifting the heart as if at a diagonal from the floor, allowing electricity to move through the spine and the nervous system a little bit more smoothly if possible. As you exhale, you might release your awareness once again toward the point between the eyebrows, the prefrontal cortex. And just take another 10 or 15 seconds to rest and feel. And being sweet with yourself. Coming back whenever you feel ready.
Thank you so much, Brooke. I consistently get super like blissed out whenever you lead a little meditation thing like that.
Um, are you noticing over time that your access to bliss is different as you practice?
What a good question. There was a time where I had a meditation practice every single day.
Mhm.
I was like using an app, so it was tracking my streak, and it met me. And I
Uh,
know when things are incentivized like that, I don't like breaking my streak, but once I do, it's hard to get back into it. So it's sort of an all or nothing. Like the psychology works on my perfectionism in my brain. But I decided to do it for one calendar year and see how it would go. And I still remember New Year's Eve, I was at a party and I realized I hadn't meditated that day. And so I went under these like bleachers at this like circus New Year's Eve party and did my 10-minute meditation at like 11:50 p.m. on New Year's Eve.
can I stop you and ask you a clarifying question?
Sure.
When you realized that you hadn't meditated that day, was it because an alarm actually went off, or was it something in your body
It
or
was
your
in
brain?
my brain.
It was your brain.
It
Uh-huh.
was like, hey, you
Sure.
didn't do that thing today. It's like, oh
Sure.
no,
Sure.
I'm
You
one
you
day
were in
away. I don't want
you
to
were
lose my streak.
training. You were training yourself. You
Yeah,
trained.
yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm. Changed your brain.
did. So, yeah, so, the first month or so of practice, it's total monkey mind,
Oh, for sure.
like hurting my new kitten that I have, just crawling everywhere. Ah, let's do anything but the task we're supposed to do. Um, and eventually it got easier to be still and sink into the practice because I got more practiced at it. And I mean, that's also how my yoga practice goes, is my body's all wanted to wiggle around and do stuff, and then eventually it mellows out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
For any conditioning of any kind,
Hmm.
right? It's, yeah,
Yeah,
conditioning for bliss.
yeah. It's like you're myelinating the pathways in your head to do the things that you're doing, whatever they are, good or bad.
And I don't know how long that relaxation lasted. Maybe it was 10 minutes, but it does take the mind, the nervous system. My understanding is 15 to 20 minutes to
Hmm.
actually start to settle.
Hmm.
And then there's a shift of brainwave. And then from 20 minutes on, you're kind of in the zone.
Yeah.
Um, so noticing that the monkey mind exists and is active for those first 20 minutes, um, to me is its own, like, it's it's liberating to know that, like, I don't have to be, I'm going to be in monkey mind for 20 minutes. So
Hmm.
like if I'm like, I sat down and I tried for a minute and I just couldn't do it, you know,
You just
like,
have to persist.
this is about a disciplined, repetitive practice over a long period of time.
Hmm.
It's written in the Bhagavad Gita that way.
Hmm.
Disciplined, repetitive practice over a long period of time will get you to liberation, whatever that means to
Yeah.
you.
Hmm.
It might be the same for everybody once we get there. I don't know.
Here's a big question for you. Is yoga a religion?
Cue the REM song, Losing My Religion. That'd be funny if we had like planned that.
That would be really funny.
We'll do that next time.
I'm pretty sure we don't have the rights to that, but if we did,
Sure, right.
we could edit it in. Maybe
We
you
could
could
both sing.
record you singing it and then we
Yeah,
can
right.
splice it in.
That's me in the corner. Yeah. This is me in the spotlight.
That's you in the spotlight.
Losing my religion. Yeah. Is it a religion? So it can be practiced as a religion for sure. It's a philosophy, it's a way of living. And yoga has a lot more meaning than I think most people know or understand. So it's not just exercise, of course. And there are practices where we can apply our inherent devotion. But really, what my understanding is that in religion, I I tell you what to believe. It's based on a belief system. But spirituality is based on experience. And so if you practice yoga and you have an experience that leads to bliss or a sense of liberation or something of well-being, you might just lean toward it again.
Hmm.
And I don't know if that's religion but the difference is that with yoga, we're suggesting and offering techniques, tools, technology to actually practice these things so you can have the direct experience of God or whatever that means to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Goodness or bliss or oneness or liberation or like I said, I don't know what it's like for you or for anybody else, but
right.
I have my theories. So does that answer the question?
It does. And the audience has now asked 2 questions.
Sweet. Hit me.
So, in regards to the yoga practice that you just, the meditation practice we just went through, Maddie asks 20 minutes is a long time, capital L long. How do you recommend people make it through that time just to even really start? So, especially like if someone has ADHD or whatever, how do you get from.
It's a perfect question.
It's like a couch to 5K, but spiritual in nature instead of physical.
It's the what?
It's like a couch to 5K, but spiritual in nature instead of physical.
I don't know what couch to 5 spade is.
5K, like 5 kilometers. So it's
okay.
How do people start running? Like if you want to train for a marathon and you're a couch potato, how do you go from couch potato to marathon runner? Same question, different topic.
How do we get from island A to island B?
Yeah.
So I really love the idea of one when talking about some larger like idea. What is like that first step? So that first step could be a lot of different things, but if you do that first step, like maybe to you, it's like find a chair or actually think of doing it or something, right? So what I find is that if I can actually get on the floor or get in a chair and sit for it, I will probably allow myself to take one breath where the exhalation is a relief. That could be the first breath. I want to go into relaxation. I want vasodilation. I want electricity to be able to flow up my spine to my spiritual eye with a relaxed body. And then I want to breathe in a relaxed way so that my respiratory diaphragm is stimulating my vagus nerve, which is sending information from my body about pain or comfort up to my brain and telling my brain how to respond. So if I can allow myself to get like physically comfortable just for an exhalation, feel a tiny bit of relief, then I'll probably stay there for another breath. 4 breaths is statistically significant difference in the regulation of the nervous system. So I tell myself, if I can stay for 4 breaths, try that. And then the suggestion is like, stay a little longer, stay for, are you doing a technique? Are you practicing a breathing technique or a mantra or some sort of repetitive movement with your body? If you are, then the suggestion is to do that practice for as long as it's comfortable. until you've stimulated the energy upon which you can rest when you're just meditating, noticing the breath. So do the technique and then sit and rest for as long as you did the technique, or a little bit longer, could be twice as long. That's the hard part, is to like be still and notice the shifts of subtle energy.
Yeah.
So we have techniques like breathing techniques or mantras, noticing those embodied practices of the spine, the seat, the temperature, coming back to the technique or the exhale, the relaxation. So it becomes this trot through a practice. And I suggest to stop before it becomes uncomfortable or before you become irritated to the point where it's going to create an impression that you're irritated by it. Because those impressions are what we're actually neutralizing when meditating. As far as yogic mysticism says, we're neutralizing the whirlpools of feeling. So if you can find comfort, like do it until you feel comfort. It could be just one exhalation, sitting and just one exhalation. Start small. We're all super overstimulated. And so if we try to add too many new things for too long, we're never going to do it.
Yeah.
So where in your house are you going to do this? Are you going to do it in a regular place each time and setting something up so that you can just go over there and sit in it or lie in it? Having a little space for oneself can be a really good first step. Spiritualizing that zone, that will magnetize you back, likely will help anyway.
One thing that I love about, now I'm a homeowner. Oh my gosh, I never thought that would happen in my life. One thing that I love about my new house is I have this big carpet that we didn't have in our old house. And there's like this spot that's super soft. And that's where I have all my yoga blankets and my yoga band and other collateral that I use for my practice. And so when I walk over there, it's like, oh, look, here's this thing. I should just do that right quick. And I'll, throw a blanket on the ground and get my legs up the couch. Instead of a whole wall, I'll just do the couch. Because it's easy and it's right there. And,
can be more relieving for the hips to do it on the couch, have your knees bent.
Yeah.
I was going to say, there are times when I'm here, I keep looking down at like the spot where I do it. And like, there are times that I look at it and I think, yeah, there's that stuff. And I walk right by, but it's inviting to know that it's there and to be able to have it in my view.
Yeah.
Keeps it in my consciousness, in my waking consciousness.
So Maddie has another question for you. Is there a wrong way to do yoga?
Oh gosh, sure.
What's the wrong way to do yoga, Brooke?
Well, I think that's a long, with resentment is one wrong way to do it. So that you're hurting yourself. That's another wrong way of doing it. In the type of yoga that I teach, which is like the yogas of rest, you don't want to go into any pain or strain or tingling or numbness or burning or even dissociation. Like you want to be able to be with whatever it is that you're working at and exhale and find that vasodilation again, that relaxation phase. So doing it with strain is doing it wrong. Not doing it is doing it wrong. I mean, I could go on and on probably, but like I think that's a pretty good right?
Yeah. I can tell
You
you that I feel like I had a lot of rules in my brain about how I'm supposed to drink water. Like it's, oh, you're only supposed to do 3 ounces every 15 minutes or something. And so I had
don't
all these rules in my head about it. And then I just wouldn't drink enough water because I'd be like, I can't do it right, so I'm not going to do it at all. Or I take a
yeah.
sip and then 2 hours goes by and I'm like, oh no, I didn't have a sip every 15 minutes. I'm having a sip once every 2 hours or whatever. So recently I decided I'm just going to have a goal of a certain quantity of liquid to consume a day. And it can be any liquid, and let's see if I can just hit that goal. And so, like last night, I was like chugging two of my
Nice.
21-ounce water bottles at 11:50 at night because I hadn't done it before midnight again. And but you know what? I hydrated and I got all the water in for the day that I needed. And yeah, maybe it's like the perfect version of drinking water is just constantly taking little sips. But with my like the way my attention works in my brain, it's easier to have like four big chugs throughout the day and then just be fine. Than like trying to remember to take little sips very frequently. And so, anyway, but I'm overall I'm drinking more water than I used to, which is good. It's making all kinds of things in my body work better than they do otherwise.
Hydrate
Um,
is key.
yeah, but it was like my perfectionism about how I drink water was stopping me from drinking water. And so I
Right,
wonder if people have perfectionism around how they practice yoga and if that's stopping them
right.
from practicing yoga or meditating or
Yeah.
whatever.
Well,
Yeah.
also it's wise to learn and do some yoga so that you know how your physical body actually moves in space like a skeleton, so
Mhm.
that you don't do it wrong, which
Mhm.
means unsafely, so that you can
Yeah.
harm
You don't want to
yourself.
injure yourself or others.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, there is a style of yoga, a school of yoga called I Rest. It's I Rest Yoga Nidra. Yoga Nidra is the yoga of sleep, which where you're barely asleep, you're like in between. And I Rest was the first company to do evidence-based research on this particular style of yogic sleep.
Mm.
And so it gained a lot of popularity and was brought into the US military for combat survivors. Um, there's a line in their program, in their protocol, that is repeated by the teachers who learn this style. The line is, "You can't do this wrong." So, because it's a rest practice, there's not a lot of like technique physically to it. It's usually you're in a still form on the ground
Mhm.
or supported by blankets or in your bed or something like that. And so, because it's a mental practice and someone is well trained to guide you, um, you can't do it wrong, because the only thing that we would label as wrong would be the activity of the mind that we've trained it to do, which is what you've called monkey mind.
Mhm.
And the monkey mind is going to do what we trained it to do. And so if we have someone guiding us and coaxing us and giving us a line to hold on to as we move through the practice of rest and relaxation and rest, meditation, it will train the monkey to hold on to the line, and um, it's harder to even think that you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
There's so much shame about doing it wrong in our culture. I
Mhm.
think that's why these practices of rest have become underground, really popular, and there aren't
Mhm.
enough really well trained facilitators who can super guide you,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
to the point where you're going to keep coming back for more.
Right. Well, and how long was your certification process that you went through?
Well, that's such a good question, because it was actually an embodied like development. So who knows? Maybe I've been conscious of yoga since I was a very small child, right?
Yeah, it's been a
If there's
lifelong
a
practice.
if there's a frequency to it, maybe I've been in the frequency. What's the frequency, Kenneth? There's your whole like REM thing.
This episode is not sponsored by REM, but it could be.
Or Spotify. Um, we're both DJs at heart,
It's
so
true.
um oh my God. I'm looking at the cat. I'm like the cat on the deck. On the deck's like just having a fantasy about cat DJs. Sorry, I digress.
Did I send you that as a birthday card at some point?
I don't know. Did you?
Maybe I texted you
Maybe.
about it. There's
Maybe we're
definitely a
sharing.
picture. There's definitely a picture of a cat DJing for a happy birthday GIF somewhere.
Okay,
GIF.
well, we're sharing the brain. Like
Yes.
I'm psychic too, so it's possible that I'm reading it from your brain. Anyway, what were we talking about? The
Um.
frequency.
Yeah.
What were we
How
talking
long did
about?
it take you to get certified as yoga therapist? Because plenty of people have
Right.
started using this phrase yoga
Certified.
therapist, but they're not certified, and they're just sort of taking this thing you trained really hard at for a long time and pretending that they did that too, but they didn't.
Yeah. So you want me to explain the certification process of for a yoga therapist? I'd be happy to.
I mean, did it take months, years,
Years,
decades, multiple years?
decades, decades. Let's see. I started in 2002. And no, it was well, my trajectory was about 14 years,
Mm-hmm.
but there wasn't a yoga therapy certification like
When you
accredited
started?
program when I started.
Yeah.
So I was sort of grandfathered in, had way more experience. I
Mm-hmm.
also took all of the classes that were required eventually when they were started becoming requirements.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I started practicing daily in 2002. And or maybe a little bit before that, like mentally daily, like I knew I needed it and I was going, but not like super regularly.
Mm-hmm.
Then I practiced for 2.5 years. I don't know if we talked about this in the first one, but like six to like 5 to 8 times a week,
Yeah.
5 to 9 times a week. Like I got really into yoga. So I was
Yeah.
doing doubles
Yeah.
in hot yoga.
Oh no.
Um,
I think
and
we did talk
then
about that some in the other episode.
yeah, then
Because
I
it
went to
was like
teach.
down the street from your house, or like
No,
in the same
actually,
town as you. And it was
it
like, wow, this thing is popping up
uh,
nearby or whatever.
San Luis Obispo is not a big town.
No.
And so when Bikram Yoga came to town, all of us in our late 20s and early 30s were like, oh, something new and literally hot. And
Yeah.
like it was a meditation. We were into it. Like there was a lot of us in San Luis Obispo. A lot there was we had a yogi community doing it together and hammering our bodies and changing our lives. And it was really a high practice. Um, I know now because it's based in what I practice and teach now, which is called a Kriya Yoga. It's
Mm-hmm.
Kriya Yoga meditation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's in the same tradition. The Bikram Yoga is in the same tradition as what I teach now. But anyway, that is the frequency of it.
Yeah.
So I went to teacher training and then I kept going back to the ashram every summer and I just started picking up classes and then I was certified and then I was certified. So I was certified by my school, Ananda, and
Mm-hmm.
then I was certified by the International Association of Yoga Therapists a couple of years later, I
Mm-hmm.
think. But IAYT, the International Association of Yoga Therapists, they ask that if they haven't certified you in the United States, that you don't call yourself a yoga therapist so that we can preserve the integrity of the accreditation and certification as it becomes more um, like established.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we want to be able to have a really, like, in some cases, in some ways, standardized. We want to have standardized training,
Mm-hmm.
and we just want to develop and preserve the idea in the future of what a yoga therapist is, what their scope of practice is, that how we can track their training and who their teachers are, because this is a teacher to student tradition.
Yeah.
um, uh, a guru disciple tradition. That's
Yeah.
right. um, the way that it's put in another country, another culture, from where it came. So yeah, we want to be able to have accountability within the community, of how we're behaving, and why we're teaching what we're teaching, and also to keep it scientific. So yoga therapy, we want to develop evidence-based research to show that yoga actually works, so that the um, you know Western medical industrial complex can start to bring yoga practices into its protocol as
Yeah.
complement, so that we can, because it works.
Yeah. Wouldn't it
And
be
it's,
great if you could bill your yoga therapy to insurance?
well, we're working on that, and actually in some ways you can.
That's really
It's
cool.
starting, actually. It's
That's so
starting.
awesome.
Yeah, it is. It's good.
It's hard to fit all of the things I like to talk to you about in a 2 hour conversation.
Well, there's a reason we like each other, because you're smart and funny too, and you're
Aw,
thoughtful,
thanks.
and you're spiritual, and you're like, you want to talk about ethics and morals and spirituality, and we don't talk about it enough.
Yeah.
And yeah, uh, regent of masters of, what did you study?
Oh, I have a master's in theological studies.
Oh yeah, I just have a master's in theology.
It's true. I geek out about this stuff.
I love it. So can I. And we don't talk about it enough. And I think it can be made really interesting, especially because, you know, because of who we are,
Yeah.
you know, trans and queer.
I love how purple your water bottle is. Oh my gosh. What a luscious color.
It's so purple.
It's so purple.
We both have busted hand stuff happening today.
We do. Yeah. I got into a battle of the wills with my kitten and I won, but it was expensive.
Mm.
But the alternative was her running off into the night as a 4 month old kitten. So, nope.
Everybody hurts.
Okay, so
Another
so
REM.
Maddie asks, would you recommend having a dedicated spot that you don't use for anything else when practicing yoga?
If you can, if you're that privileged,
Yeah.
for sure.
I have
Or
a spot
multiple
that
spots.
I use regularly, but I wouldn't say it's dedicated because it doubles also as our living room.
Right.
But it's like, the yoga blankets have a spot in their little cube and nothing else goes there but yoga things and they come
And
out when
my
I use them and
spot
they go
usually
away.
ends at, I mean, I have multiple places where I can like drop and give you 20.
Mhm.
But upstairs in my bedroom, usually it's right next to my bed, because there's usually a zone right next to near my bed that where there's not a lot of traffic usually.
Mhm.
And so I have a corner that faces east.
Mhm.
East is the direction of the rising sun. We're talking about this electricity moving up the spine toward the prefrontal cortex.
Mhm.
So facing east will help to magnetize it up as it's outside. Or north, I think, is
Do you
also
have to
another.
do it in the mornings for it to count?
You don't have to, no. It counts everything. It'll add up. Like every little bit adds up. So
I love
no,
that.
I actually am, hopefully on a good day, doing it all the time. I'm
Yeah,
meditating as I'm moving through the world.
right. Yeah. Because for you, and we might have talked about this last time, but it's also hard to remember what we talked about on stream and what we've just talked about in general in our lives. So,
Yeah. Uh,
But for you, yoga is a mindset. It's a lifestyle. It's 24/7, 365. Like your food choices are yoga. Your movement choices are yoga. Your exercise choices are yoga. Your like how many people you have
try to
around and in the house and how
be,
you do
yeah.
your social life is rooted in yoga. So it's much more than just a movement modality or an exercise practice for you. It's a lifestyle.
And it's said in the scriptures, in the yogic texts, that
Mm-hmm.
if you do practice it like that, it will start happening to you.
Mm-hmm.
Like it starts happening for you so that you don't have to work as hard. It's sort of like getting into a stream, like
Mm-hmm.
flowing down with this bigger um, Ganga,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
the big river, um, an original source river. Um, yeah, yeah, there's a huge umbrella over my head all the time that is yoga. And I try to ask myself, like, is this yoga? What would yoga do? I guess is something that, I mean, I never think about it like that, but like,
Like a bracelet. What would yoga do?
exactly. Yeah,
You
exactly.
tattoo it on your wrist. What would
I have
yoga
it
do?
tattooed on the inside of the forehead, like at the point between my eyebrows.
Where your third eye is. Your third eye is just staring at what would yoga do constantly.
It actually, that's exactly right.
You have a what
That's
would yoga do colored lens on your third eye that you look out at
on
the
the
world with.
inside.
It's like a monocle. It's like a yoga monocle.
I like that it's colored. I like that it's colored. That's like, well, my imagination runs wild.
What color is yoga,
I have a
Brooke?
disco ball in there that's like flashing all the time.
Yoga
Basically,
disco.
yeah.
How do you do
It's
disco
disco.
mindfully, Brooke?
What did you say?
I said, how do you do disco mindfully?
Yeah. How do I do disco in my mind?
Laughing with you is so fun.
Um, there's got to be an REM song that's here. Stand in the place where you live, now face north.
Or
Figure out
east.
direction. Exactly. Oh my God. I never knew that REM was,
So
it,
yogic.
REM never flooded through me like this. I'm channeling. So I did my first astrology reading that was professionally, like somebody paid for it on Sunday, yesterday
Nice.
morning. It went amazing. My body was buzzing. Like I was
Awesome.
like, this channel was vibrating with the frequency of this 17-year-old with cancer.
Wow.
Um, her chart, it was rad. She was so much shinier at the end of it.
Mm,
She was so interested in something else
yeah.
besides all of the melee.
Yeah.
Um, it was such a blessing for me to be able to do that. Yeah, I love astrology too. Like I'm starting to recognize like I have an understanding,
Yeah.
and it's a language to learn. I speak French too. I
I'm
speak the
wearing my
language of
Moon Kitty
yoga.
shirt because it was Fancy
Cool.
Moon thing
That's
recently.
fun. How fun.
It's like faces of the moon with cat faces. I like the
I love
cat.
the new.
Yeah, the new moon with the cat that's just eyes, like Void
Uh-huh.
Kitty.
Uh-huh. The new
It's so
cat,
fun.
the
Meow,
black cat. It's
meow.
so good.
It's one of my favorite shirts. I don't wear t-shirts very often, but when I do, it's usually cat themed.
You have good shirts,
Thank you.
frankly. Generally.
Thank you. I appreciate
Your
that.
your shirt wardrobe is totally clever and entertaining and like um irreverent and also super reverent.
Yay. It's so fun. I love that we've seen each other enough that you have a sense of my t-shirt wardrobe. It's like the best thing
Well,
ever.
sometimes they're stunning. Let's just say that.
Aw.
The one with the cat in the
Yeah,
cosmos
yeah, that's your
that
favorite
looks
shirt of
like my
mine.
cat right here
It does.
is
Looks just like Baby
stunning.
Boy. aka Jessica. Do you want to tell us about baby boy Jessica?
Baby boy answers to baby boy and to Jessica.
Hmm.
And their official name is Ziggy Stardust because their eyes are two different colors.
Such a cute kitten.
Yeah.
Is he like 2?
Yeah, I don't know. I think he's like 3.
Oh, he's 3. He's such a
I
cute.
I think he's like 3.
Um.
I've never had
So
a cat before like this. So,
yeah, were
and
you
he
got
came
him?
to me.
He just wandered into your life one day.
Yeah, late adolescence, totally thrashed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
and
needed more yoga in his life.
we needed each other. I needed him so
Yeah.
bad. I was looking for a dog to adopt at the beginning of COVID and couldn't find one
Hmm.
from save my life. And then this white cat. I mean, I swear I had friends looking in Baja for a dog for me, and I had a friend looking for me in Vermont, and I was in California.
Yeah.
I could not find a black dog, a little black dog.
Yeah.
We found a white cat like on my deck.
How
It
about
was
the
like,
opposite?
I was like, okay, that's what you want me to do? Sure. Easy. Keep it easy. Keep it simple.
I like it. Um, so Maddie also asks, do you have any
Patty.
specific yoga recommendations for vertigo? If someone has
Oh,
vertigo, do you have like, I don't
mhm.
know if there are poses or modalities of yoga that would be better than others. Um,
A great question.
maybe
Yo-
vinyasa flow is not the best choice if you've got vertigo. It's my guess.
Yeah. So my understanding of vertigo is that it's stress related. Generally speaking, there are crystals in the ear that can get off kilter, but it often comes on during times of stress or for people who've lived for a long time with stress. So the yogas of relaxation, again, anything that is calming and self-regulating. So specific breathing techniques or practices that are really working on nervous system regulation
Hmm.
um, would be really helpful. The one of the one of the forms, the physical forms suggested for vertigo is legs up the wall, but people can get really queasy. I think that's what happens when you come upside down in addition to feeling dizzy.
Hmm.
The idea is to come into legs up the wall. So get down and be comfortable. So that's important to figure out, like, can I put a blanket under my sacrum
Hmm.
across that my tailbone is coming off of it, or blanket under the neck? And then feel the queasy and kind of notice how long the queasiness lasts. And then see if you can rest and get comfortable, like that meditative difficult part, for at least as long as it took, as you were queasy.
Mm.
And then bring your knees over to the side, rest there for just a moment so that you don't get dizzy when you come up and come up. So that's a suggestion. But I had a client who did that and um, was like, you forever. I'm never doing that again. So um, you have to watch what is appropriate for you and your body.
Hmm.
I think that the thing that helped one of my clients who had vertigo was taking a card and like putting it up and looking at it and putting it down and doing these different exercises that were really helpful for them.
Mm.
And if you wanted to make that yogic, you could have a affirmation there or a symbol that you loved, or like keep it mindful and uplifted and joyful.
Hmm.
um, that's off the top of my head. But if someone were to come to me complaining of yoga, or complaining of yoga symptoms, um, vertigo, I would look it up. And like I do research if it's something that I'm not familiar with.
Hmm.
And then I would come to the client and I would ask them if they were willing to do any of these things. And then we would like strategically work our way to that.
Hmm.
Um, but the thing that is the underlying you know, principle of everything that I teach is about relaxation and rest, meditation, and the restorative calming activities. Um, so I would begin by approaching how do we best approach rest for this person, where they are with
Mm-hmm.
their anxiety right now, or their depression right now, or their insomnia right now, and their physical body, all of that stuff. Bring them down a notch so that the vasodilation can happen, so that whatever's constricting you, constricting the bones or the crystals or whatever, the electricity, can at least have an aperture that's more like a portal, so that things can flow and information can be obtained from there.
Next question is, would you recommend trying out different types of yoga or stick with one until you get good at it?
Oh, that's such a good question.
Yeah.
Um, it depends.
Yeah.
The smart answer is it depends.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Because
So
maybe you start with the modality that really doesn't work for you, and then sticking with it is just pure torture. But
yeah,
like maybe trying a couple of modalities to find the one that works well for you and then sticking with it is a good plan. I don't know.
yeah. If you're lucky, you land on the one that works for you right away.
Yeah. And then you don't need
But
to shop around. I can
exactly.
tell you,
But
I've tried Bikram. I've tried a couple of other types, and then I tried the Yoga Nidra, like rest Kriya yoga stuff that you do. Your type of yoga is my favorite type of yoga.
it's like adult napping with lullabies. I tuck you
Yes,
in.
yes.
Or
And
you
then
learn
we
to
do
tuck yourself in.
meditations. But it's
Yeah.
also like so like tailored and considerate to like whatever ails a person. Like I have a very specific mid back pain thing, and I can only be in the legs up the couch wall shape for so long until inevitably this one muscle in my back is like, nope, we're done. And then I have to roll over. Like every time without fail, that happens. And so, like, we've found a way to have our practice accommodate for that, which is so great.
And I just had an inspiration about that we can talk about next time. But
Tomorrow, during our yoga practice together, you and me,
yeah,
you and me and the cats.
it's just uh it's just amazing how it it's a living practice.
Mm-hmm.
So however your life is to guide you will be the living practice for you. So that could be trying, I do suggest trying different teachers, but mindfully. If your, body is compromised or your mind is compromised, you want to be really discerning about what class and what teacher you choose to spend your time with. Because I went to a yoga class online Saturday morning, and I was triggered about something the teacher said about gender. I was triggered about how the teacher was commenting on people's forms and that they were perfect. Their poses were perfect. And I actually had to get up and leave the room and send a text to my trans non-binary friend across the country and say on a voice message how excruciating it was to hear this person talking about men having babies and laughing and like holding
Like
space for
saying
25 people.
saying transphobic things.
Like, I don't know if it's phobic, but it's definitely ignorant and not broad-minded enough, because they haven't been exposed to the notion that like the gender thing and the pregnancy thing, like there's a lot of room for nuance,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And, I have my own like body dysmorphia, body dysphoria. And that's why I don't go to yoga classes. I was in my living room because like, I need a really, like you said, I need a really tailored class and a really informed instructor,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to relax and let
Yeah.
myself exhale and
Mm-hmm.
vasodilate. Um, and they're hard to find. So I usually practice on my own,
Mm-hmm.
or with other queer or trans teachers who are trauma informed,
Yeah.
because it's just I don't have the bandwidth anymore to um, translate in my mind
Yeah.
what they mean with how it impacts me.
Yeah. Well, that's a great transition to the next pile of questions, which is all about trauma informed decolonizing queer yoga. Oh my gosh. So many exciting things to talk about. Only so many hours in a day.
I know my cheeks are flushed from all of the excitement.
all the all the yoga zaps,
The
all the chi moving
Kundalini
around.
moving through me, prana,
Exactly.
the prana. Mhm.
So, Brooke, why is trauma informed or trauma sensitive yoga class or a teacher important to seek out?
I'm glad you asked. Um, I wanted to read a little bit from this book called A Queer Dharma by Jacoby Ballard, who is a trans yoga therapist, yoga teacher, who's been working in social justice circles for like 20 years over in New York. And I think they live in Utah, in Salt Lake City. And so there's a chapter, this is yoga and meditations for liberation. So Jacoby has some experience in Buddhism. It's not really so much my practice. I don't really know that much about it, but this is a really beautiful book that talks about a lot of things that we're dealing with as we're moving in social justice in the world, and how we can integrate spiritual practices, the spiritual practices that are yoga and Buddhism. Anyway, there's a chapter in here in part 2, which Jacoby wrote first before part 1, called Teaching Queer and Trans Yoga. And it starts with this question: why do LGBTQ people need a separate space, a separate class? Isn't that exclusive? People have asked me this question over 15 years of teaching queer and trans yoga. My answer is that the class is needed now, given oppression within and beyond yoga in the US. Ultimately, I would love every yoga class to truly embrace all students of every gender, ability, race, and age. This is just not the case right now. Until we take on oppression and privilege and its dynamics in yoga classrooms, trainings, and retreats, a class like queer and trans yoga is needed to provide queer and trans people with the life-saving tools and skills of yoga. I want to read just a little bit more. There's a section in here on queer folks, trauma, and addiction, which is all part of my story. It is important not just that queer and trans people access yoga, meditation, and other healing practices, but also that we be held by community leaders who have healed themselves too. Having a teacher and Sangha reflect back to us various aspects of ourselves. Having a teacher and a Sangha, a spiritual community, reflect back to us various aspects of ourselves is as important as the science of the practice itself. So that's another reason why I am motivated to live a yogic lifestyle, is because I am committed to teaching, because it loops back to
Mm-hmm.
me being able to take care of myself and stay in community and not be in isolation and engage in the world, which helps to lift my self-esteem and give me purpose. I just want to read a little bit more, unless you want to stop. Okay. We must provide our communities with healthier tools to cope with the immediate impact of trauma, such as mindfulness, yoga, dance, and prayer. There's a part in this chapter that lists all the reasons why there's oppression and trauma, specifically for the trans and queer LGBTQ community. And so this reading right here is particularly impactful because Jacoby's just gone over the homophobia, the heterosexism, the twice as likely to have an addiction than straight counterparts, all of the problems that we live with in our community. So we must provide our communities with healthier tools to cope with the immediate impact of trauma, such as mindfulness, yoga, dance, and prayer. Strive to overthrow or dismantle the systems of oppression that create that trauma in the first place, and integrate self-care and community care in our homes, businesses, organizations, and neighborhoods. So this is all in pages 162 or something to 174. In trauma-informed teaching, most people within queer communities are survivors of sexual violence. 64% of trans people, 13% of lesbians, half of bisexual men and women, 40% of gay men. To be in the body can feel quite dangerous, for the body has been a site of harm, and a survival mechanism can be dissociation when our attention leaves the body. I speak, Jacoby speaking as himself, I speak directly to the experience of trauma in class and share that safety in our bodies is not a given. It's not an arrival point, but rather a process. I try to destigmatize trauma. There can be an idea that part of what made us queer or trans is this trauma. Overcoming the shame of trauma is mixed with internalized homophobia and transphobia. There's a lot of really beautiful expression, articulation of the art of teaching yoga. And it's important to recognize it both as a science and an art. It's a science because the practices are predictable if the results are predictable and replicable if the techniques are practiced consistently in the way that our teachers taught them. And it's an art because each person brings their own experience and their own expertise and training, and yet to be able to speak, when I speak, on whom does it land? I want to cultivate the skill, the technique for it to land for as many people as possible, because that is the ideal. However, in a queer and trans class, for example, or when I don't really teach that class, but I do teach individuals who identify in certain ways similarly to the ways that I identify. And that helps to bridge the shame and the stigma and the misunderstanding of all of these things that we're all living with, that if it's addressed by some instructor who has absolutely no consciousness of what they're saying or how it might land, or like how to apologize or remedy or come to, after, like, I'm never going to go back to that teacher's class.
Right.
And so I might never go back to yoga,
Right.
which is a shame because yoga has so much to offer anybody who is willing to practice it. There's so many different ways to practice yoga.
Yeah.
Meditation, relaxation, right? Self-regulation, spirituality, the physical aspects of it, the attitudes, the ethics, like anybody can access something for it to be helpful. But when we're just teaching these 200-hour teacher trainings and like pumping people out and like sending them out to be healers in the community, it's dangerous. So we have things like certifications and, But for the
Yeah, not
person on the
all yoga
ground,
teachers are built the same. Some have
no,
20 plus years or a lifetime of experience, and some people just did a thing for 1 year or half a year, and now they're out there doing stuff.
4 weeks.
Yeah.
You have to have a little bit more experience than that. Most yoga teacher trainings require 6 months of personal practice before you're enrolled in it. But you know, some people have dedicated their lives to teaching a hot, fast, physical based, cis, heteronormative, often white style of yoga
Mm-hmm.
that isn't going to reach the Asian American population as easily, the, you know, Black American population as easily, the Hispanic population, that the Latinx. I grew up in LA. That's, I don't mean that to be an offensive term. If it is, I apologize. Anyway, the trans community, right? Like communities like that I tend to meet, communities with stigmatizing mental health diagnoses
Mm-hmm.
that will keep people isolated and in seclusion, who could really, really benefit. Those are the folks that often find me and that I work really well with, because that's my lived experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, you know, I've heard you talk either on this podcast or on your friend MP's show. I forget now which one it was because I
Oh,
listened to the one you did with MP. Um, but
Sweet
I've
Perfection Yoga Therapy.
yes.
Must check it out. MP is trans non-binary. Yoga therapist, is a yoga nidra leader, an
Mm-hmm.
incredible human, incredible. I love them. They recently bore a child, like less than 2 years ago. Um, I not identifying as a woman, and um, they're a force, and they're also a Leo,
All the
like
Leos.
me and you.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
A
So
bunch of
watch
Leos
out.
trying to learn to take a nap.
A bunch of Leos napping. That's so funny. Oh my gosh. Uh, a bunch of Leos changing the world and like living in the queer trans community. Like I know quite a few of us Leos living in the queer trans sector. What is that about? Yeah, we're like
So, how is
warm.
relaxation and rest decolonizing?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're talking about the importance of trauma informed, but it's
How
also
is rest
decolonizing.
political?
Yeah. How is rest
How is rest
political?
political? How is rest rebellion? I love talking about this so much. Jack, thank you so much for, I mean, this is the core of it, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, this is as embodied decolonization as being trans or polyamorous, or, you know, living and setting yourself up in a community where you can be neurodivergent and like make your way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's against the grain, right? So resting, like
Mm-hmm.
decolonizing time. So
Mm-hmm.
like it takes at least 20 minutes for my nervous system to calm down during a meditation. Um, that's on the front end. On the back end of a rest practice, there is a liminal space that is very spacey and floaty that you want to
Mm-hmm.
be able to go from that liminal space slowly into your waking, more active life.
Mm-hmm.
And so working with that space between may, without jarring it, while preserving it, because you've just done something that you've invested some time in, and it feels so good. Usually one's experience, if they're practicing and find a teacher they like and all of that, they're practicing well, you want to go back to it. And so that's going to change the way that you move through the world after the practice, and it's going to start to rearrange one's life. That's from micro to macro. But when we learn to feel what is happening in our body and we stay with it and we don't let go of it, a lot of us are going to feel, and it talks about it in this book, A Queer Dharma, we're going to feel anger, we're going to feel grief, we're going to feel love, we're going to feel some big feelings that in their pure form are motivators for something. Yeah. And so if we can become aware of how it is that our physical body is telling us how we feel, then we need to work on the feelings and like set up the structure so that we don't feel that way anymore because we're awake. Things are going to change incrementally and so subtly, but from the ground level, that it is revolutionary. It is we all can say that yoga has been revolutionary in the United States and around the world since 1980. In the 2000s, when I first started practicing on a daily basis, yoga was like 80 million people were practicing it. And it was like a multi-billion-dollar business, right? So these classic, the ethics, non-harming, non-stealing, being generous, being moderate, controlling your energy and your life force in a right way, not being greedy. These are foundational to all the practices of yoga, even if you're pumped out in a 200-hour yoga teacher training. Every teacher learns that and is conveying that vibration in some way to every student who has to 80 million people in the United States alone. And now their kids, and then their kids. So I'm going to talk about, I'm going somewhere with this. The United States, the most popular style of yoga is an active body-based yoga. It's not a meditation practice, and it's not a devotion practice like they have in India, where they go to the temples and they light the incense, and like that's a different path. Yeah. But what I'm finding is that's really exciting is that people who have been practicing asana, which is the forms, the movement, the exercise practice, I believe that people's consciousness has been changed by the asana, the forms, but also by that frequency. And they are prepared, they have been preparing for the consequent experiences of yoga, which are meditation and union with the divine. That's like the end point. So there's a process and an ultimate. Yeah. I think that I've been waiting, and I've seen this and believed this for a long time, and I'm one of the only people I've ever heard to say it out loud for as long as I've known it, is that this yoga is going to weave its way in, and people are going to become hungrier for meditation and rest practices. I didn't know at the time that it would be widely considered a revolutionary thing to rest, but I have known because of my own experience of resting through yoga that it is revolutionary. It has revolutionized my life, my social world, my sensitivity, my psychic ability, my creativity, my self-acceptance and self-worth, the way that I budget my time, what is a value to me financially, and have become over time personally a really like I live kind of like a spiritual person, I would say. Yeah. You know, I have a quiet, like really calm, sort of controlled, focused lifestyle,
You do.
generally speaking. Yeah.
You like
Thanks.
cook cook things that are within the yoga food things.
You're
What
like
is there's a
supposed
whole what is the
you're
name
supposed
for that? I forget.
you're supposed to cook all your own food
Mhm.
unless someone who loves you is cooking the food. Like you're not
Mhm.
supposed to eat restaurant food so much,
Mhm.
street food. Unless that person on the street knows you and has you've grown up at their cart. Um, what did you ask?
What's the word for the yoga of food? I'm forgetting the name of it.
Oh, so the sister science of yoga is maybe what you're talking about,
Mm.
which is really the study of life,
Mhm.
and its Sanskrit name is Ayurveda.
Yeah,
Is that what you're talking about?
it is. Yeah, and there's like kapha and the other two, and
You've got to know about Vata, and you've got to know about Pitta.
that's right.
Um, those are the doshas, and those are combinations of elements because Ayurveda is based on the five. Is it? Yeah, five elements. That there are different ones in Chinese traditional Chinese medicine, but um, corresponding with from the lowest chakra up, right? Earth,
Mhm.
water, fire, air, and space. So combining those five creates a dosha. It creates a blueprint for what is appropriate for you to ingest and speed at which you move through the world and what how you get deranged or thrown off balance and getting back to that balance by adding in or taking away elements or things that are comprised other things that are comprised of elements like food or color or um, it's about sleep, like it's about cycles, sleep wake cycles, hormonal cycles.
Mhm.
It's about creating a rhythm so that you can continue to stay open to uh, the the creator herself. They call Kundalini moving through your system, your astral anatomy, your astral spine, from the root up, from the lowest chakra, taking all that karma, all those impressions of emotions, and grandma didn't buy me the ice cream that summer in Atlanta. Like all that gets like blasted up through. We use the breath. The breath is the most direct and powerful way to self-regulate
Mhm.
on a scientific level and also more esoterically. So the question was,
I just forgot the name of Ayurveda.
well, what was the question before that?
How is relaxation and rest decolonizing? Which
Mm-hmm.
I think some of what you're saying is also pretty anti-capitalist, right? In a world where we're told you must work to be worth anything, taking rest is a radical act. And maybe even paying to learn how to rest better is a super radical act because not only are you not making money, you're spending money on learning how to lay down,
Decolonizing. Yeah. 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 On
which
checking
is
out of the
pretty cool.
executive system, the executive clock system.
Yeah.
And Ayurveda, learning about being educated in any way is also decolonizing, right? Like colonization blasted out cultures. So some of us have remnants of traditional wisdom. And what we're doing is like scraping, scraping a lot of them together to try to figure out how to be a new culture 200 years after industrialization.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm learning about yoga and Ayurveda and I'm learning about my own health and how to use the elements and understand the workings of the elements in nature, also connected with an idea of spirit, my spirit, um, it's decolonizing. It's taking you're going to make different choices with your capital.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't be committed to your health and like using your capital for that, then you're just not on board with decolonization.
Yeah.
You know, um, you're voting
Self-care
with
is
your lifestyle.
revolutionary. Self-care is totally revolutionary because, the overculture of capitalism wants you to be a cog in the machine and
That's
just work
becoming
and work
horrible.
and produce
You have to
and
pay for water. You have to
mm-hmm.
pay to live on the earth. They're making decisions that are weird, awful, and
Yeah.
continuing that. It's going to change. We're watching it happen. It's pretty exciting.
So now we're finally getting to the pile of questions about yoga and gender dysphoria. And the first
Mhm.
question in this pile is, why should trans people care about yoga? So you've already talked about this from a couple of different angles, and if you feel like you already answered it, we can go to the next one. But do you have any other things to say on, like, why should a trans person care about yoga?
Well, there was a mention in a queer dharma about dissociation.
Mm-hmm.
And when we like give up agency over our body, we are relinquishing a really potentially really powerful tool for decolonization
Mm-hmm.
and resistance, right? Resisting with rest. I mean, what sounds better? Nothing sounds better than that. I don't want to go to the protest. I want to rest. So
Yeah.
that goes back to the last question.
Right.
Um, I think there's a process that happens as we are deciding to live in our bodies or change our bodies. And there are a lot of potential like dangers when we are both realizing we're trans. I know this has been true for me, or like working with my identity and who I am in the world. Like I don't want to I don't want to feel a lot of my body because it doesn't match the way that I am moving through the world.
Right.
To do yoga, to be able to relax on my own or rest, to be able to get into my body so that I can move in a healthy way. There's so much more to say about this, but um, why should it be important to anybody?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's the same. And also, we can create a community that is informed by the same values and share more values together. um, that's a really important piece. The community aspect of practicing yoga is really relevant. It's and we need to connect with one another, and we love each other in a way that we love in a way that is just, I find, different in some ways
Mm-hmm.
to the, I wanted to say the regular world, but what is regular for me anymore? All of
Yeah.
my friends are trans,
Yay.
queer trans.
Lucky you.
I know, I know. I've fallen and I can't get up. No, let me stay down and rest. Let's all rest together here, together in a puppy pile. Um, so the trans community should be what is it? Just as interested? Why should
Why
we
should
be?
trans people care about yoga?
Why should they care?
So there's a community building aspect, there's
So that,
potential uses to treat dysphoria.
and maybe so that you have something to care about.
Yeah.
I didn't have like really anything to care about. My sister had committed suicide. I was so checked out of my body of you would never know. I slept 22 hours a day for months at
Mm-hmm.
a time. I ate a lot of um, carbs and sugar, and just so that I could go back to sleep.
Yeah.
Like I didn't have anything to live for. I felt like after that,
Mm-hmm.
um, and so um, yeah, it gave me something to do, and it gave me people to be around, and gave me my body back, and it gave me my stability back. physically and emotionally and financially now, because it's turned into my livelihood. There's a lot of opportunity too in yoga if it is your path and you do become trained and you do meet people who you love and want to work as a yoga teacher or a yoga therapist or a meditation teacher or as anything with the understanding of yoga. There is space in the industry. I hate to sound so dry but like there's space in the world. We need more. We need you if you're a healer. And I think that if you're, I don't use that word a lot, but if you are a healer and if you're wounded, you can be a really powerful healer, especially because you know what it's like to be wounded.
Mm-hmm.
You know what happened to that stuff happened to get you wounded.
Yeah.
And you know what it's like to work to feel better. Um, and that's what we're all doing with the social justice stuff. We can do it in our physical bodies and fortify the social justice stuff. And it's essential.
Yeah.
Rest is essential. Movement is essential. Learning how to be in this body is essential if we're going to do good work and feel comfortable.
Yeah.
I want to feel comfortable. Like if that's the only thing, how can we feel more comfortable? And sometimes we live with chronic pain, we can't ever really feel comfortable, but maybe we can feel that pain a little differently like this and a little differently like this. And then now 5 minutes have passed because I've been doing things to try to feel it differently. And like maybe the pain is like some dimension that I'm embodying, but not recognizing that there are other dimensions.
Yeah.
And expanding consciousness and relieving life through the mindfulness, through the sticking with it moment by moment by moment.
Yeah. I can definitely say that engaging with a yoga practice has shifted my relationship to my chronic pain. Like, it hasn't made it gone completely away, but it's like the pain is demanding attention, and after I do a yoga practice, it feels tended to. So even if it's still there, it's like a kid with a fever who like at least got to have like an ice bath and now is cozy in a blanket. So still the fever is there, but like it has been considered and paid attention to. And so it's easier to bear and tolerate because there's not just this anguish of like I need attention, I need help, you know. It's been tended. And that's pretty powerful.
That's beautifully said. I love that. I love you.
I love you too. Daw. As we talk about how especially trans and queer people sort of leave their bodies because of trauma, because of dysphoria, because of so many reasons, I kind of think about Peter Pan chasing his shadow around Wendy's bedroom, and like Wendy helping Peter sew the shadow back onto his foot, and
I don't
how
remember.
like a yoga teacher is
Wow.
like Wendy helping Peter
Oh my
sew
God, I
his
love
shadow
that.
self back to himself. So it's like calling ourselves back home, and
Yeah, not just our
especially
physical body, but our spirit back home
yeah.
to what is our own individual experience while living and or
Hmm.
being comfortable with it because we're in the body.
Yeah.
It's okay.
I can point to the time in my life where I stopped living in my body. I was in middle school. My
Me
mom
too.
wanted to drop me off at the swimming pool, and I
Mm.
hated my bathing suit because I didn't like how I looked in it. And it was because either because I was curvy and I didn't want to be fat, or because I was starting to look like a woman and I wasn't a woman in my brain. And so it was like my body was betraying me. I wanted to be just like flat, slender guy shaped, and then all of a sudden I have hips and breasts and what is happening. And, so for a long while I thought it was internalized fat phobia. And so I worked to decolonize that. And then I realized, no, actually, it was a gender thing all along. And so, like, when I hit puberty and started to get secondary sex characteristics, is when I left. And so, like, doing a yoga practice has helped me come home to myself in a way that, like, I haven't been home. It's like a cabin in the woods that I haven't been in for 20 years. And so, and I think I've said that analogy on stream before. It's Trans Capybara's analogy. But, um, it needs a fresh coat of paint. It needs some structural maintenance in ways that, like, if I had been cisgender, maybe I would have paid more attention the last 2 decades. People put on their freshman 15 in college or whatever, but it was much more than 15 for me. And I'm still carrying it around. Um, and, I can say after having my top surgery, my relationship to my body has changed. Like, just last weekend, I gardened shirtless for the first time in my life. And it was such a pleasure to have the
Oh my
sun
God.
touching my back,
Mm.
like, and just having like dirt fall on my chest and not even notice it until later when I'm like in the bathroom cleaning up and I'm like, oh, my arms and chest are covered in dirt. Like, I used to hate dirt and not want it anywhere near me. And like, now it's like, oh, look, I get to be like farmer boy, BOI Jack out in the sunshine planting these plants. Um,
To have sun on my bare front body feels divine
yeah,
and not allowed mostly.
well, there's always witch camp for 1 week a
Uh-huh.
year. There's a special place we're allowed to be naked in the sunshine. Um, but if anyone's interested in that, DM me on Discord. I'll tell you about it. Um, it's a good time. There's a lot of trans people there. It's queer as hell. I love it.
And so for me, there was a process of leaving my body
hmm
that stuck for a really long time,
Yeah.
15, maybe closer to 20 years,
hmm
that I had to unwind over a
Right.
process. And it still happens to me. I
Yeah.
haven't been practicing and moving my body the same since COVID, and I can tell that like my connection is not as strong
hmm
to I can dissociate really, depersonalize, like, and I'm working on being out in the world with my non-binary mindset, which isn't even the right term for it. um Neutral. I have like a neutral gender
hmm
in my soul. It's
Yeah.
neutral.
Yeah. We talked about it last time you were here. It's sort of a post gender almost, sort of everything and nothing at once
It's a
perspective.
spiritual thing.
Yeah.
It's an evolutionary thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so I just yeah, did that answer that question? Was there more?
Um, there's like four more questions about yoga and gender dysphoria, and I'm trying to figure out which ones have we sort of talked about and which ones
Mhm.
do we still want to talk about.
I also want to talk about mental health a little bit,
Okay.
like,
So how about this one then? Yoga as a support relative to mental turmoil that comes with gender dysphoria.
yeah, I mean, we have covered it. It's all the same, but I think to speak to it is part of my, battle cry for, um, we need more trans yoga teachers who
hmm
are experienced and educated and committed and work with um, mentors, and we need to, I think, I listened to this podcast, So Many Wings, last week, that really has had an effect on me. And I'm going to be meeting with the um, facilitator of that, Jax McNamara, who is also, I think, non-binary trans, in Santa Fe, who co-founded the Icarus Project, which is the bipolar community underground, like the punk rock bipolar community. Um, anyway, they were talking about being honest about our struggles with mental health, even as a healer. And again, I use that word as an abbreviation for what we all do.
hmm
Um, and I don't want it to be woo woo. But For me, I have been, for whatever reason, kind of this forerunner or leader in the conversations around mental health, especially in my previous community in San Luis Obispo, California. I was bringing movies about hearing voices, one called Healing Voices, to the community, and showing Crazy Wise, which is another film about spirituality in other cultures and what mental health looks like in our culture and its ties to spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been really isolated, and I could stay in a little bubble there in San Luis Obispo. I was going out to conferences, mental health conferences, and talking about yoga. I was going to yoga conferences and talking about mental health.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing research and projects and working in schools and colleges, and I was doing all of it, leading retreats and classes, and I was alone, and I didn't have anybody to have a conversation with about being gay,
Mm-hmm.
about being trans or non-binary, about even the concept of it. Nothing about polyamory that wasn't snickered at.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't feel comfortable talking about my mental health because I was so traumatized by the way that it was treated.
Mm.
And I needed to earn a living in this little town where everything was super homogenized, white, upper middle class. If I acted creative, I always wanted dreadlocks, never did it because I would look too weird and I wouldn't be able to have any respect, I think, is what I thought. I'm discovering now, as I'm coming out more and more about mental health, about my identity, I recognize that there's a process that can only be facilitated by being around other people. And so by being in a trans community, queer community that's practicing yoga together, I don't really have that quite yet. And I'm looking at the ways that I can facilitate that in a way that sustains my health and well-being.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what the statistics are on mental health in the trans community, because we don't have enough studies on anything about the trans community. Nobody's really putting money toward it at this point. However, on the ground, we can do it. And I believe that, there is a high experience of mental health diagnoses and, in the community, and also of addiction and all of that stuff, which leads back to trauma, which can lead back to yoga if you're trained in trauma-informed yoga and self-regulation skills. It's the perfect, it's the perfect cauldron of helping mental health, helping identity, dysphoria, whatever it is, all the disses and the D's, bringing love back to the D's. So I also really masked if it's whatever my neurodivergence is, the Brooke flavor of neurodivergence. I tamped it down because I wanted to get along with people, and I couldn't find stable people who also had the creativity that I did, and I didn't want to be with wackadoodle people who weren't grounded. So I guess I erred toward being more homogenized and, cis and all of that, because I wanted that. I was willing to sacrifice having the dreadlocks. And in the interim, I learned how to have some stability and live in this world, because I didn't even want to live in capitalism. All that stuff would bother me from the get-go. Right. But I was able to figure out a way to do it by doing something that I love, which is yoga and service. And now that I am kind of more stable after 20 plus years, I'm now meeting my people and expressing myself and practicing playing with, what are those psychic abilities? How can I use them to help people more? How can I move my body differently? How can I think differently? No, with this new information about, like, I have permission and neighbors who also are doing it their own way and differently, and how do we get along with each other, and like, how do I come back to myself and learn to be myself in community? My home community was really traumatizing, and so I never really learned a lot of good social family skills too. And I want to balance it all. I want to balance, like, the yoga practice of devotion and the artist in me, and the really kind of straight person that, like, does things with integrity and is mindful of it and accountable, and the person who loves mindfully, and speaks mindfully, and, like, is accountable when there's something going on with in a loving context. To me, that means not having a whole lot of people around me. I'm very particular about who I keep around me, because it's an octave that, for me to be able to be myself, completely myself, is an octave that I can't find a harmony with as much as I would like, as much as I've experienced. And I think that part of it, and I don't mean to sound arrogant, but that's kind of what makes leadership. Like, I don't have any other peers of doing what it is that I do, how I do it. And with the combination of, like, my neurodivergence and classical yoga teaching, like, so I can broadcast something to a certain community that really needs it, and I want to be able to reach my community better and more. So that's kind of my prayer, I guess, right now in this lunation of this Scorpio eclipse full moon, is to be able to reach more people in a way that allows me to be as expressive and honest and not so constricted feeling. There's a big part of me that doesn't feel a lot of freedom. So having the spiritually liberating practices of meditation and resting are super, that's, like, so valuable, extra valuable than to the average cishet person.
Yeah.
It's like it is to the Black community, like it is for any, like, marginalized community, the disabled, the blah blah blah. I still haven't gotten to, like, the nuts meat stuff of, like, the things that I want to talk about mental health, but I think it seems like we're coming maybe down to a time point. I have no concept of time at this point. I'm like,
we've been live for 2 hours, and I do have a thing in 26 minutes that I need to wrap up and get to. But the concluding question that I have for you is there anything that I didn't ask about that you wanted to share about yoga, or yoga and gender, or yoga and mental health, etc.?
the intersection of yoga, mental health, gender, and spirituality.
Yeah.
I want to know what people need. I mean, I would ask a question back, like, what is needed, and what's people's capacity, and to actually, like, I don't know, figure out a way that we can all build like a really strong yoga core for this movement. You know,
Um,
a cadre of yoga folk,
Squad, a yoga squad.
squadron. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. What do I want? People can come to my training this weekend if they want to. They can come to my Friday night class, just the Friday night class. We're going to do a restorative sequence for mood balancing. And then we're going to kind of deconstruct it over the next couple of days and talk about trauma. And why are you laughing?
Because I just crossed my arms the opposite way of usual
Oh
because
gosh,
that
I've
was
been
the
doing
thing
that
we
all
worked
week.
on last week.
I've been doing it all week too. It's good for your brain, I think.
It is. I usually it's the opposite way of usual, and it's funny to me because it suits the hand that I hurt yesterday better to cross it the opposite way of usual, and so it's so funny that we practiced that, and then 6 days later, I
It
had
was a
a
tool. It was in your toolbox already.
it's so funny. We do have another question from the audience, though. Delirium asks if you find yourself dissociating during yoga, how do you
Yeah.
bring it back to a healing session or practice?
You
Like,
mean how do you bring your mind back to your healing practice?
sure. Or if you have like
Yeah.
a short guided meditation for dealing with dissociation and return, that could be your closing offering you wanted to do, and then we'll make sure to leave time for you to talk about your workshop this weekend too after that.
Yeah, we could totally do that, but we did it at the beginning. So it's the same thing. And I'll give
Yeah,
you the secret of it.
yeah.
One of the secrets of it is getting into your five senses. So when you're in a yoga class and you're starting to dissociate, you want to come back to that embodiment. So something about the five senses, I think that's why a hot yoga class can be so powerful, because there's a sense of you're in tactile, like, right, noticing your environment, like, oh, okay, I dissociated. Well, what's happening in the room right now? Is something happening that you're dissociating for? Like
Hmm.
there's a fight or something, right? Like something. Or there's, for me, it would be like there's somebody, like there's a sex vibe, like that makes me dissociate.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or like a predator vibe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Notice any messages that your mind or your body or your emotions are telling you when you check back into the environment or to your body or to your emotions. Like, where did you just go? Like, where'd I go? Okay, can I come back to this moment? Check out the body. You could do feet like we did: feet, lower legs, upper legs, hips, right out to the hands, arms, upper arms, the back, three parts of the back, the neck, lower, middle, upper. Come to the spiritual eye. So that's this tradition, is we always channel it up to the spiritual eye. Noticing the form of the spine and keeping the spine open. I feel like I lost my train of thought. What was the question?
Uh, we were talking about
From
how to
delirium?
yeah, from delirium in the chat. If you find yourself dissociating during yoga, how do you bring it back to the
Right.
session and the practice?
For those techniques, and you learn them and you can call on them, you also
Mm-hmm.
come back to the breath. Again, the breath is the most direct, powerful way to self-regulate. So learning about the exhalation, coming back. I hope that answers the question that they're asking. I'm not sure if I understand the question, but
Well, it sounds like if you have a moment that you notice you're dissociated, doing those observational practices can be one method of bringing yourself back.
correct.
Noticing the breath, noticing, your connections to the floor. For me, at least, like
Right.
noticing where gravity is impacting my body, because gravity is a constant, at least on Earth. Maybe if you're
Cool.
in space, gravity isn't a constant and you have to find a new meditation practice. What an interesting thing to consider. How do you meditate in space? That's a different episode. Um,
I'm going to turn this light off
okay,
because
that's
it's a
fine.
sun lamp and I'm like getting,
Blasted by all the Leo goodness.
it's late in the afternoon to be in the full sun
Yeah,
for
it
me
is.
right
It
now.
totally is.
Um,
Um, yeah. So, and there's at least two people in the chat who didn't catch your practice at the beginning of stream who are interested in it.
yeah,
If you felt like
sure.
leading it again.
Yeah, sure. So so the landmarks that I use, I pretty much use them all the time in like every tech. Yeah, the technique is the same. I don't stray really from the technique. It keeps things very organized for me and it's not overwhelming. So I find my seat. I notice where my body is connecting to the floor or the chair or whatever it is that I'm sitting in. Just like Jack was saying. And then I like to suggest sometimes inhaling and pressing the sits bones down and lengthening the spine up, because we've been practicing breathing in and holding it with anxiety. So if you're going to do that, lengthen your spine. And then as you exhale, soften the shoulders. If you're sitting up, you might glide the chin back. Sitting up can be challenging, so I teach people how to sit a lot. Lifting the gaze toward the spiritual eye. So this is the prefrontal cortex, the pineal gland, our higher centers that separate us from the rest of the animal kingdom, functional, executive, response, center, not reaction, which is at the back of the neck. So we glide the chin back, keep the back of the neck open. You can think about that anytime. What's happening with my neck? How is this energy flowing or not flowing through that column, that hollow tube? Observing your environment, you might notice any sounds in the room, any sounds beyond the room, and the sound of your own breath, the sound of the exhalation. You might observe the sensation of the organic pause that resides at the end of the out breath before the following in breath. Releasing your awareness once again toward the spiritual eye. If you feel to, spine is long or comfortable, chin is tucked slightly. You might notice your body temperature, or again, your connection to the floor, whatever you're resting on, your sense of touch, your sense of sight, eyes closed or open. You might lift your gaze toward the spiritual eye, maybe just an inch above the point between the eyebrows, softening the weight of the eyes back into their sockets like they're sitting in bucket seats, keeping the floor of the lower jaw soft. Observing any sensations of light or shape, color. Eyes soft. Throat is soft, relaxed, open. Point between the eyebrows. Inhaling, you might bring your awareness up the spine, noticing any scent to the air. Exhaling, any taste in the mouth. If it feels comfortable for you, you might bring your awareness to the emotional field, observing any emotional feeling. It can, of course, be multiple feelings. Be sweet with what you find. Exhaling, inhaling and lengthening the spine again, as if magnetizing your energy up to the spiritual eye. Releasing the shoulders, exhaling, observing any thoughts in the mind, any patterns of thinking, habits of thought. Just take a moment. Let yourself think. Noticing what you're thinking, that you're thinking, and that you're breathing, exhaling, releasing tension if you can, or changing it if you can. there's any way that you can honor any thoughts or feelings or physical sensations to make yourself more comfortable, that could be what we call an intention. Let yourself find comfort. And if you can't find comfort, you might simply notice the breath and the exhalation, breathing through the nose if possible, both exhaling and inhaling through the nose, or working your way to closing your mouth over many breaths. It's fine too. You can take any of these techniques out of that sequence to bring yourself back to your body, being sweet with yourself. Gaze is lifted toward the brow, finding your exhalation and coming back whenever you feel ready. Did that answer or complete the?
Yes, it did.
I've never talked about it in public before, but something happens to me sometimes when I'm open like that makes me want to cough. It's something in my lymph nodes, in my throat. There's like energy that's moving through, and like I think getting bottlenecked there.
Yeah, literally.
And it makes me want to cough, and then if I don't cough, it makes me cry. And I think that that's probably you know, a natural mechanism that's releasing energy through my body, but it can stammer me up. And I think it's part of the self-acceptance and the acceptance by my community that I can actually allow myself to feel that and be with it. It sounds like crying. It's not pretty or whatever. It's not like right. Your standard detached, but like I'm nothing but attached to what's happening in my body, so much so that whatever this mystical kundalini is that it's talked about in all the texts, it's running through me, and that helps me to change the world. I have to be really relaxed for it to happen and focused on it and inviting sometimes. And if I'm not in an inviting place for it, it will take over and mess with my mental health. That's what it does. Yeah. So I'm going to be teaching a regular class starting June 3rd. It's Friday nights, 5:30 Pacific to 7 through True Self Yoga. That's through a yoga studio here in Olympia, Washington, in the Pacific Northwest. I'm also leading a restorative yoga retreat and training this weekend, and I'll do it again. But again, it's deconstructing this restorative yoga sequence of really gentle forms. We're learning about self-regulation, how we do what I do, what we just did. It's super chock full of rest, learning and resting a lot. So it's over Friday night, 3 hours of a practice. We won't practice that long, but and then Saturday it's 10 to 4, and then Sunday it's 11 to 3, and it's a small group. We're going to do it online too, and it's appropriate for anyone. It doesn't matter what your body is like. It doesn't matter if you've never done yoga. All you really need is willingness. So it's a tool that you'll have in your back pocket that's so helpful. I mean, can we talk about Roe v. Wade? Like,
sure.
I took the morning after pill because I was pregnant because an IUD failed, or else it worked and I got pregnant and then it like aborted it, but like didn't abort it all the way or whatever. So anyway, I took RU486 and I forgot to take the codeine or whatever painkiller. Like I forgot.
Oh no.
And so I was in a lot of pain.
Yeah.
Um, with my cervix dilating and all of that. And I was in the bathroom and I did a child's form folded forward. And then I did one side of a twist. And then I did the other side of the twist. And then I expelled whatever it was that was trying to get out of me.
Wow.
So it was useful for home termination of a pregnancy. That's sort of a a dramatic kind of poignant story, but it's true. And so it can help regulate mood,
Yeah.
improve sleep quality, decrease pain, um, all the good things that it does. Anyway, I would love to invite anybody, if you don't feel that you have the financial security to attend, if you wanted to attend all 12 hours, or even some of them, 3 on Friday, or you needed to come and go online, let me know, because I would love to have you there. And I teach better when I'm teaching to people. Teaching to nobody in outer space. Posted on Instagram today. It's just like not good for my mind. So I'm inspired by people, having people in front of me, and especially especially folks like me, folks like us, who will appreciate an environment that is trauma sensitive and open to discussion, and who you are and where you're at and what you're going through, um, in a gentle and sweet way. Um, that's how I teach all of my everything that I teach is like that. Um, and there's an opportunity coming up this weekend. And if you're seeing this later in the future, check my website, brookewestyoga.com, BROOKEWESTYOGA, because there's probably something coming up the pike. I have a newsletter. I would love to adopt your email address for my use so that I can send you information about stuff like that happens. That's really the 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 clincher for me to reach out to you. You can see me on Instagram and Facebook, on my website too. But
Have we passed the early bird registration window for your
actually, we
workshop this
did.
weekend?
Yeah, last night. I need to go in and make sure that all those buttons are
Switched
uh,
over.
switched. But it if you miss the early bird registration and you need some financial support, you want to come, just be in touch, um,
Because you're generous and not greedy, just like yoga teaches.
it needs to be an exchange for sure.
Yeah.
And um, this information is really valuable and it's super important. And if you're
Yeah.
interested in it and you feel like you have the space for it, do it.
And for
I
your
mean,
workshop this weekend, anyone can come to that as well. It's not like you need to be a certain level of fancy.
absolutely. You don't even have to be a yoga teacher.
Yeah.
You don't even really have to have practiced yoga ever.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I didn't really think about it like that, but I haven't said that out loud while talking about this thing, but it's true.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things that I really love about your approach with yoga is how accessible it is. Even as someone who's disabled and fat and sort of failed out of other yoga stuff because I wasn't fit enough to do them, and is resistant to exercise in any form, and you know,
ADHD,
ADHD. Oh God, my brain is
whatever
everywhere.
else,
Yeah.
whatever the brain you have,
Yeah.
yoga maybe has not been accessible, and we figured out a way to make it really attractive,
Yeah.
because it's just mellow and
Yeah.
it's really good.
Yeah.
It feels good. Your experience has been good.
It has been. So,
So,
friends, all the links to follow Brooke are in the chat. They're in the show description. The website is great. Please do sign up for Brooke's mailing list. That's probably your best plan.
Yeah.
And
I'm like, I don't send out too much stuff.
it's true.
Sure. Don't send out
You're too
enough.
busy teaching yoga to write countless emails about random stuff.
Yeah, early bird registration though, that's a good one to remind people about.
So, just so folks know, next week's guest here on the talk show is going to be Neurodivergent Rebel. So it's another reoccurrence of a guest we've had once before coming back to the show, like 6-8 months later, and we're going to be talking about autism and what it's like being trans in Texas, which is a whole time. So for now, Genderful would like to thank our guest for being on this podcast. Please feel free to join us live on Twitch on Mondays, check out the replays on YouTube on Fridays, and keep an eye on your favorite podcasting platforms for edited audio-only versions. As Nefertiti likes to say, trans rights are human rights. That's right.